Hi, this is my video response to Same Old G's Top 5 RPG Memories. I was tagged by Samwise7RPG, thanks for that. And I will be tagging a musician and Mifarok's designer Bart Vickerness. I will also tag your main man Underwood, the designer Within the Ring of Fire. I'm also tagging RPG enthusiast and blogger JaderD30. I will also tag retro reviewer Captain Courageous and blogger Draven Swiftbow. He's also a reviewer as well. Well, let's get started. I'm going to try to put these things together in a chronological order. Memory number 1 would be when I first ran my Dungeons and Dragons adventure. That is, when I first acted as a dungeon master. If some of you watched my review of the AD&D introductory box set, you will probably know that my first RPG experience or my introduction into this hobby wasn't really positive or memorable. So I decided to become a dungeon master. Even in these days, I play as a dungeon master most of the time. To stop those mistakes from happening, those things that I perceived as mistakes or bad things in an RPG session. And well, I got the introductory box and I read all the rules, and I started running my own games right away. And I think it was a very crucial part in my development as a human being, because I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, and back then in my early teens I wasn't as reliable or confident because of that. So being a dungeon master proved to me that I could serve as sort of guide or coordinator or leader in certain activities. In this case, in creating an exciting adventure where everybody was having fun. And it also served as an excuse to spend some quality time with my family, because my siblings were always outside because of work, somewhere in Mexico City, some others were in Torreon or Acapulco, etc. So we were all spread out through the entire Mexican Republic, and it served as an excuse to spend some quality time with them. Now, my second memory would be shortly after that. I was running a Forgotten Realms campaign, and one of my players decided to create an elf fighter, and the other players were still in sort of like a video game mentality. So when this player created his elf fighter, he was like, I want to create a forester or hunter type of character, even if I don't want to pick a ranger. And he purchased his sword, and he also purchased a small knife, a dagger, and put it inside his boot. And the others were like, oh, why are you purchasing that crappy knife? It's going to be useless, it doesn't do any damage. But he was, oh, I want to be a forester type of character, and I want like a survival knife. So they went into these caverns that were pretty close to the Underdark. That is, it was underground, but not really underground. And they bumped into this camp of Quaggots. And the fight started, and this elf fighter wanted to kill a Quaggot and then move a bit away so that he could let the other characters inside the cave, because it was a very narrow space. And he was doing just that. He was getting some wounds as well. He was pretty damaged, but he almost killed a Quaggot, and the Quaggot started retreating. And he decided to chase down that Quaggot. As you probably heard, the Quaggots are kind of like Sasquatch or Bigfoot type of enemies. And this fighter attacked the Quaggot, but he fumbled during the charge, and he tripped and dropped his sword and ended up crashing down onto the far side of the cave. And this wounded Quaggot, seeing that the fighter was without his sword, started charging at him with vengeance on his mind, on his primitive Quaggot mind. And so the fighter got up, and he was like really desperate, like he didn't have any weapons at hand, and suddenly he remembered, my dagger that I put in my boot. So he took his dagger and stabbed the Quaggot and killed it. because it was already wounded because of previous attacks, and that way character concept actually saved that player character's life, and that was pretty cool, and it also looked pretty cinematic the way he took the knife out of his boot and attacked. Now memory number 3 is kind of like a grouping of different memories. Back then, just before high school and just just before high school, we were having some RPG sleepovers. That is, we would in those weekends when we had no homework or had to study for some exam or test or whatever, we would get together from Friday to Sunday and play RPGs non-stop, and it felt like we were going camping because everybody had their backpacks, and the games were usually hosted in my place, but sometimes we went to other houses, and we had all this gaming material, that is video games, board games, RPG related stuff. Most of the things were mine. So it wasn't like a really heavy backpack for the others, but for me I always have to carry this huge backpack or a duffel bag. And so we played RPGs, video games, watched anime as well, did all sorts of geeky activities, and it was pretty amazing. It was very fun. However, like with many good things, they had to come to an end because of two negative situations in two of the players' lives. Let's call them Player A and Player D. Player D had very fanatical folks, that is, fanatical religious people who were like, if you don't worship Jesus, you're going to hell, and stuff like that. So when they found out that their son was into RPGs, into these games that you could cast spells that pretty much recreated many of the spells as seen in the Bible, they were like, oh, how dare you do that, that's profane, and they forbid him from playing because his character could create food and water and things like that. So, and the other player, his situation was a bit more ironic. The thing is that his parents were homophobic. Player A's parents were pretty homophobic, and they thought that our RPG sleepovers were some sort of gay orgy or something, and it was quite ironic in one sense because our talks during those nights were pretty straight. That is, we would talk about the cutest girl in school, that hot teacher. We would be looking at the pictures of different anime girls, and we were like, oh, I wish she were a real person, she would be my girlfriend, oh yeah, and all that. There was even, I don't know if you are familiar with an RPG for the PlayStation 1 called Lunar Silver Star Story. It was an anime style RPG, and one of the discs, I think it was, I don't remember if it's the special features disc or the soundtrack, had a secret minigame. If you place it in your PlayStation 1 and press triangle, the playback option, you would have this Pong-based video game that you had these like square bases, and you had to use this line to protect them from this bouncing ball. Sometimes the ball multiplies, if I remember correctly, and these balls, if they connected with your base, it will take chunks of the base, and the winner was the one who was the last man standing, the one who kept his base safe. But the cool thing was these square bases, you could put the image of one of the female characters in that base, so everybody was protecting his sweetheart, was like, oh, you won't do anything to my Luna, oh, I will crush your Jessica before you destroy, etc. So it was kind of like that. But as I was telling you, Player A's parents thought we were having some gay thing. And here's another ironic thing. It was actually Player A's brother that was gay, not him. Player A's brother was the one doing all sorts of crazy things and flipping around. And the funny thing is that he was always pointing at us and saying, oh, you guys are playing RPGs, you're gay, and that stuff is for losers. He was obviously doing that to sort of projection and to keep his parents' attention focused on us. But so, his parents kept nagging player A, kept pestering him, and just making a hell out of his life, and he stopped coming to the RPG sessions. And this is another, well, that's pretty ironic, and because his brother was the one who was doing gay activities, and now that I think about it, it's quite possible that it was his brother who put that idea into his parents' head, so they would be focused on player A, and his brother would do all his stuff. So, but that's pretty sad. But at the same time, as I was telling you, when that lasted, when the RPG sleepovers lasted, it was incredible. It was pretty fun. Now, memory number 4. This happened about like 11 years ago, more or less. It was when I was during college years. At that time, I had a pretty hard time. Even to this day, it's pretty hard to get some players every now and then. Before I get into that, let me tell you a bit about the situation in Mexico as I perceive it, in my experience, how RPGs or the RPG situation have been developing in Mexico, so to speak. It's really difficult to find good players or players at all, because people here are still under that mentality. Well, in Spanish you call it pan y circo. In English, I don't know if it's called circus and food or circus and bread. That Roman tactic in which you keep people distracted by giving them sports and alcohol, and then they don't think about anything else. In Mexico, that's pretty standard. If you don't play soccer, or sorry, if you don't watch soccer, you don't even play soccer. If you don't watch soccer and drink beer, you're probably weird. So that was a bit hard, and I think there should be a bit more of an incentive to use your imagination here. There's a very low literacy level. You probably heard already that our current president Kuhn mentioned 3 books that inspired him. So you can imagine how the rest of the population is faring because of the situation. And there's also some very negative stereotypes of the average RPG player, because the ones who play RPGs are usually labeled as gang members and cholos, and for the most part they are right. I don't know why they gravitate towards RPGs, but a lot of gang members and cholos actually play a lot of RPGs. The Dungeons and Dragons and Vampire the Masquerade were the most popular ones last time I heard of it. So it's quite a grim situation. Even one of the pretty hard to find hobby stores, physical hobby stores. For example, there was this store called Dunas Comics. They didn't have RPGs, but they had Magic the Gathering and some anime videos. And it was here in town. Even when I was younger, I went to that store. But then it turns out it was a front for a child pornography operation. So that's pretty sad. Even to this day, I think there are like 4 hobby stores in total in my area, and one of them doesn't carry RPGs, and the other 3 are in some pretty horrible parts of the city. That is, in those parts that you can't go after a certain hour, or you probably get killed or mugged, or you probably bump into a corpse. So it's quite horrible. And so, I was telling you, that time during college, I was having a difficult time finding people to play RPGs with. So they told me, I got introduced to this guy who they said, oh yeah, he likes to play RPGs, but they were like, oh, be careful, he's really weird, be careful. So I thought maybe it's just a prejudice, but they were a bit quite correct in a sense. I went to his house. He was playing a game with 2 of his friends. And right from the beginning, his friends looked pretty like jumpy, and like they were always on the edge. They had really, really red eyes, and I don't think it was because they were not sleeping well. And they kept doing jokes about drugs, and so they're probably drug addicts. One of them was the worst, like always twitchy, and like he was going to jump at something, and the other guy was the most decent one of the bunch. But he was really weird too. He had this like a metal finger, like like a metal finger with a metal sharp nail at the end, and it was always like my precious like this. And the dungeon master was, I think he was pretty schizo because in college he seemed somewhat educated, but when he was a dungeon master, he was kind of a jerk. At that time, I chose to play as a monk, and the other players were a dwarf fighter and an elven wizard. And my monk, at that time, I was halfway through my most important martial arts training, probably, and I decided to spice up things a bit because the dungeon master will okay describe how your character is fighting and all that, and they will be like the dwarf fighter would be like I swing my axe in a wide arc, and else I'm casting magic missiles, and the missiles kind of look like little skulls in flames and things like that. And so whenever I attacked with my monk, I would do some martial art move that, oh yeah, well, when that drow is attacking me with his punch dagger, I'm going to block it, and I'm going to attack his neck and finish it off. And he would be like, hey, that move is impossible. And I was like, no, it's a legitimate martial arts move. And he's like, I'm telling you it's impossible, like that. And so I didn't want anything awkward, so I was like, just indulge me, it's a fantasy game. And I was, okay. And we kept playing, but he kept like questioning every move that I would do with my monk. Eventually we got into this ambush when dark elves were surrounding us in a stone bridge, and I noticed that there was a mind flayer standing at the top of a stone column, and I figured maybe that their leader, or they have some sort of alliance with it. So I went running at him and jumped and landed on the column and started going one-on-one and with this mind flayer, and I did amazing with that monk. I went Bruce Lee on that mind flayer. I scored like 2 critical hits, I think, and I even grappled with it and tossed it down the column. It was pretty good. It was amazing. But then I noticed that I was scoring just too many hits and it wouldn't go down, and even the other players were like, that mind flayer should be dead already. And we looked at the dungeon master, and he looked pretty nervous. So, and then he's like, "Oh no, well, he's not an advanced type of mind flayer." But it made no sense because based on that mind flayer's attack bonus and the abilities he was using, he wasn't that high, or didn't have any template. And then he suddenly went like, "Oh, he's using this psionic attack on you. Make your saving throws." Oh, and we rolled pretty high, and it was, you failed your roll, you were all paralyzed, and it was total party kill. So in my opinion, it seemed like the Dungeon Master got angry and wanted his mind flayer to crush us. It was quite unfair, so I didn't return to play after that session. But then I found out a bit of why he got so annoyed or upset every time I was mentioning martial arts moves. It turns out that he and some other people had a sort of like a fight club. They were supposed to be martial artists. I doubt it. They seemed more like thugs to me. And they would beat the crap out of each other. But seriously, I mean, it was full contact and all moves allowed, and they would hurt each other pretty bad. And so maybe when I was showing some martial arts knowledge, he would be like, "How dare you speak of martial arts? You know nothing," like that. Well, I'm pretty glad that I didn't stick around, because if they didn't know I knew martial arts, if they found out that I knew martial arts, maybe they would have wanted to fight me. You know how those guys are; they want to prove that they are superior. So anyway, but still, that's probably the best monk I've handled in a tabletop RPG. And then this memory number 5 was somewhat recent. It was about like 6-7 years ago, more or less. We had 2 new players. They were sisters that came from outside of the country, and they were quite serious, and they were like around 28, 30 something years of age. And one of them was a secretary for an embassy, and the other one was a doctor. So you can imagine that they had this like respectable aura around them. and we started playing the game. And the secretary chose to be a barbarian. That was hilarious because she was very serious and very polite, and she chose a barbarian, and she was acting all chaos and rage, you know. And the doctor chose a bard. However, the funny thing is that the sister that was a doctor was doing this crazy thing with the miniatures. We were playing Pathfinder, and we were playing with miniatures, not with the Mind-Side Theater completely. We were representing the battlefield and checking area of effect, attack of opportunity, different obstacles that could serve as cover as well, difficult terrain to move over, etc. But she kept grabbing the miniatures and placing them in really weird places. That is, if you were in a lava cavern, she would grab the miniatures and start placing them in pools of lava. If we were playing in a castle, she would grab the miniatures and put them inside the walls, and it was just crazy. And not just her miniature, she would grab everyone's miniatures, even the monsters. And it was driving me nuts because I think as a dungeon master, I was a dungeon master. It was hard for me to see what area of effects or how the situation in the battlefield was affecting each character. So I was like, oh, please don't do that. We need to check the effects and the area of effects, etc. But she kept doing it. I had to tell her 3 or 4 times, and she kept doing it. And I didn't want the situation to become awkward. And I didn't want to pull her aside and say, "Are you nuts? Why are you doing that?" So I just started memorizing where each miniature was, and as soon as she would move one of the miniatures, I would move it back into place. So we were suddenly describing the scene and playing, but it was almost like a battle between her and me, trying to to keep the miniatures in different places. Eventually she got the message and she stopped doing it, but it was pretty crazy. Now I have two theories of why she kept doing that. Theory number 1 is that being a doctor, maybe she was tired of being just too precise in her work, and she wanted to unwind. And I also heard that she had a pretty strict childhood, so maybe she almost never played with dolls or miniatures, and as I was telling you, she was going loose in the game. And my other theory is that she had a crush on one of the players in the group, and she was trying to get his attention. Still, I think there are better ways to flirt than moving things around like that. And those are my top 5 memories. I hope you found them entertaining. Well, thanks for watching my video. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.